This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Ateli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. China blocks US stock listings for smaller, underperforming homegrown companies in its latest effort to reduce financial dependence on the US. Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong warns of growing global instability after Beijing's live fire drills in the Tasman Sea sparked criticism over lack of notice. South Korea's intelligence agency reveals signs of North Korea sending about 1,000 more troops to Russia this year to aid Moscow in its war against Ukraine. And Japan's birth rate has dropped for the 9th straight year in 2024, falling another 5% to reach an all-time low. Also in East Asia tonight, China's DeepSeek has shaken up the global AI race, making Beijing's mark in technology. But how does it compare to ChatGPT? Get ready for a chatbot showdown. China is increasing its scrutiny of U.S. listings by domestic companies as it looks to arrest record capital outflows. Now, the move also coming at a time when Beijing is making an effort to reduce financial ties with America amid heightened tensions and uncertainty around U.S. tariffs. Now, Roland Lim has more details on those developments. It's over to you, Roland.
Thanks, Oteli. The latest regulatory tightening follows a surge in Chinese IPOs on U.S. exchanges, even as Beijing tightened control over domestic listings. Now, China's securities regulator is planning to impose tighter control over U.S. IPOs of Chinese companies with small capitalization and weak fundamentals. According to the Financial Times, the CSRC has raised concerns about whether small homegrown companies truly require offshore listings to raise funds. Now, public records show 61 Chinese companies floated shares in the U.S. last year, and that's up from 37 in 2023, even as the U.S. listing boom of Chinese stocks reported wild price swings that sparked concerns over manipulation. The number of IPOs on China's local bourses fell more than two-thirds over the same period. Meanwhile, Beijing has tightened regulations on offshore capital raising since 2021. Analysts say the crackdown is China's latest efforts to reduce financial ties with the U.S. amid geopolitical tensions. It also follows multiple warnings issued by U.S. regulators about small Chinese companies fraudulently boosting their stock prices. Analysts say that Beijing's move underscores concerns over excessive speculation on New York-listed Chinese stocks, tarnishing China's image internationally at a time of slowing growth and shrinking foreign direct investments at home. To help unpack the implications for the capital markets, we're joined by Francis Lun, CEO of Geo Securities, coming to us live from Hong Kong. Francis, good to have you on the show as always. Now, after a record number of Chinese companies listed in the U.S. Stock Exchange last year, the China Securities Regulatory Commission says it now wants to deter small cap listings and to avoid the pump and dump allegations. Is this the case of stock manipulation, or is it excessive speculation on small cap stocks itself?
Well, it's more than that. Actually, several years ago, there was an exodus of Chinese companies leaving the U.S. stock exchanges because, according to the U.S. regulators, a lot of irregularities. But all of a sudden, in 2024, the situation changed abruptly, and Chinese company found that U.S. listing is much easier to go through than the domestic listing or even Hong Kong listing. And of course, the requirement for a U.S. listing is much lower than a Chinese listing or a Hong Kong listing. So you have a flood of Chinese shares listed in the U.S. And many of them, I think most of them are small companies. And of course, they face much less regulatory scrutiny. So they engage in a lot of speculative activities. So that really gives the Chinese shares a bad name. And I think overall is really a continuation of the US-China animosity, especially since Donald Trump comes to power. So I think China, the Chinese authority is right in clamping down on this excessive flight of capital to the US.
Right, you said China clamping down, and that's the right move. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that point?
Well, of course, U.S. is putting so much trade sanctions and also technology sanctions on China. It seems like the U.S. is waging a trade and technology war on China. So it is very bad to see Chinese companies going to the U.S. and list there. Why should you give business to U.S. companies? This is not right, especially when the U.S. government is so hostile to China.
Francis, China is also seen to be tightening scrutiny of outbound investments via Hong Kong listings as well as other foreign deals. The State Administration of Foreign Exchange now has to give a no objection indication prior to approval of those listings. Now, these measures are aimed at supporting the renminbi, are they not? Because it's facing depreciation pressures.
Well, actually, this regulation has been enforced for quite a long time, and actually, all foreign listings must receive the blessing of CSRC. But the problem is whether they are really monitoring it tightly. In fact, even right now, there are a lot of companies wanting to list in the U.S. which is so-called based in the Southeast Asia, but actually these are Chinese companies owned by Chinese nationals, and so people will find a circuitous route to listing, even though the Chinese authorities are clamping down on this exact same activity. So it will be tough for the Chinese authority to clamp down on overseas listing of overseas domicile companies that are actually owned by Chinese nationals.
Francis, the Chinese authorities, at the same time, they're also pushing for more large-cap mainland-listed companies to pursue secondary listings in Hong Kong. For instance, the world's #1 EV battery maker, CATL, they could possibly raise $20 billion. So then do you see more tech firms possibly flocking to Hong Kong, all thanks to DeepSeek's AI boom?
Yeah, definitely. I think the Chinese authorities want to let all the first line, the industry leaders to list in Hong Kong. In that Hong Kong does not have foreign currency control, so it would be much better for this large company to have freedom to use the foreign currency they raise in overseas listings. So this is one way, of course, to help the Chinese financial market. And of course, we have to thank the CSRC and the Chinese government for that.
Does sound like a good bounce back for the Hong Kong IPO market. Thank you, Francis Lun, for your insights from Hong Kong, CEO of Geo Securities. And I'll be back a little bit later on with more business news. For now, it's back to you, Telly.
I'm looking forward to that. Thanks so very much for that, Roland. Now, in other news, Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong has warned that international security is becoming increasingly fragile. Now, her statement comes amid growing concerns about a Chinese naval flotilla operating in its waters and Beijing's recent live fire drills in the Tasman Sea. Well, both Australia and New Zealand have criticized China for not giving adequate notice of its naval exercises in the region. Beijing, meantime, reiterates that its Navy firing drills are in line with international law. Roger Maynard tells us how Australia seeks to counter potential threats in the region.
In truth, this so-called snapshot of Australia's foreign policy for the year 2025 couldn't have been better timed. Although it wasn't directly aimed at China, it acknowledged that Beijing's assertive approach to its security and international relationships was having an impact on the entire global system. Although there was no reference to the Chinese flotilla stationed off the Australian coast this past week, the presence of the Chinese Navy on Australia's doorstep had a worrying relevance, especially given the so-called live fire exercises it was engaged in. Foreign Minister Wong's statement provided a broader assessment of the challenges facing Australia in this part of the world and beyond. It listed the government's key priorities, such as bolstering Australia's strategic position in the Pacific, expanding economic ties with Southeast Asia, and increasing links with regional powers such as India and Japan. But she was also clear about the risks and dangers facing Australia. Senator Wong said Australians faced confronting signs that assumptions relied on for generations were less assured. We live in a world of increasing strategic surprise, ever more uncertain and unpredictable, she added. It was a strongly worded statement which insisted the government was determined that Australian vessels and planes would continue to take part in freedom of navigation exercises in contested waterways like the South China Sea. She said the region was dealing with a military build-up unprecedented at any time since World War II, with intensive great power competition that risked spiralling into conflict. While the government's foreign policy outlook was aimed at sending a realistic yet confident message, there is no denying there are many here who don't share its optimism when it comes to handling an increasingly assertive China. And that's being clearly demonstrated by a reaction to the presence of a Chinese naval flotilla near the Australian mainland, which has triggered angry clashes between the Labor government and the opposition. The biggest issue has been the government's apparent ignorance of that Chinese live fire exercise between Australia and New Zealand, which was only reported to them after a Virgin pilot picked up a message from one of the Chinese ships. It was another 10 minutes before Australian Defence was given the news, which posed a serious threat to many of the commercial aircraft flying between Australia and New Zealand. While the incident happened in international waters, it's reported that no advance warning was given by the Chinese flotilla, which is now sailing westwards in the Great Australian Bight. The obvious question is, what does this say about Australia's military preparedness? Today, Defence Minister Richard Marles urged Australians to calm down and take a deep breath in response to China's warships conducting military drills off the Australian coast. But the opposition has been quick to exploit the situation, accusing the Labor government of ignoring the strategic implications of the entire episode. And that's a worrying accusation, given a general election is only weeks away. Roger Maynard, CNA, Sydney.
Meantime, China says its military drills near Taiwan were routine and dismissed Taipei's complaints as what it calls attention-seeking tricks. Well, the island had earlier condemned the exercises as a blatant provocation by Beijing as it reported a surge in Chinese military activity around the island, and also accused China of setting up a shooting exercise zone off its southwestern coast. Taipei says it identified 45 Chinese military aircraft and 14 PLA naval vessels, including 7 warships, in China's drill zone, located just 75 kilometers from its shores. Beijing views the self-ruled island as its own and has not renounced the use of force for what it calls unification with Taiwan. Taipei says it has deployed troops to monitor the situation. South Korea's intelligence agency says there are signs that the North has deployed additional troops to Russia this year to help Moscow with its war against Ukraine. Officials estimate more than 1,000 more personnel were sent over in January and February, adding to the estimated 11,000 soldiers already there. But it's unclear where they have been deployed. Well, this news comes amid reports from CNN and sources of how troops have been moved to Russia. It's believed soldiers were transported by sea to an obscure Russian military port called Dunai. At least 2 Russian ships were used to help ferry them over. Ukrainian officials and Western intelligence earlier estimated Pyongyang sent around 12,000 of its troops to Russia last year. They also believe about 4,000 of those soldiers have since been killed or injured. Well, the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation says North Korea is behind the theft of some $1.5 billion worth of the Ethereum cryptocurrency from Dubai-based exchange Bybit last week. Well, the FBI says that this was the work of a group called Trader Traitor, which is also known as the Lazarus Group. The group is said to be engaged in exchanging stolen assets to Bitcoin and other virtual assets. The FBI added that North Korea is expected to further launder the stolen assets with the intention of eventually turning them back into fiat currency, otherwise known as government-issued currency. The Lazarus Group's existence came to be known a decade ago when authorities accused it of hacking into Sony Pictures. Well, that hack was believed to be in retaliation over a film that mocked North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The group has also been blamed for stealing more than $600 million of virtual assets back in 2022 from the Ronin network and $300 million of cryptocurrency from a Japan-based exchange in 2024. Well, we're going to go for a short break now, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, a proposal by 7&i's founding family to take the operator of the 7-Eleven convenience store chain private falls through. And later, Japan struggling to fend off a world without enough matcha as a global craze whisks up demand. Hello again. Good to have your company on East Asia tonight. As promised, we've got more updates from the business world with Roland Lim. And Roland, Hong Kong's stock exchange appears to have turned a corner.
Yes, this look that way, the city's fortunes as a listing hub, marking a turnaround on the back of improved investor sentiment. Hong Kong's bourse operates its net profit and revenue jumping to new quarterly records. A sharp jump in trading revenues after China's announcement of economic stimulus measures boosted investor sentiment as well. The net profit at Hong Kong exchanges and clearing reached a fourth quarter high of $486 million, climbing 46% from a year ago. Revenue also hitting a new quarterly record, rising 31% to $820 million. Both markers topping analysts' estimates. Recent years have seen the exchange's performance hampered by slow growth in China's economy, regulatory tightening that kept a lid on companies' fundraising outside of mainland China, as well as geopolitical tensions. But stock markets in mainland China and Hong Kong have rallied in recent months after Beijing announced a slew of stimulus measures. The Financial Secretary Paul Chan has said that the funds raised from new listings in the city rose nearly 90% to $11.3 billion last year, ranking it fourth globally. He added that the bourse is processing more than 100 new IPO applications and affirmed increased investor interest, spurring a revival in China's stock market this year, fueled by a surge in sentiment towards Chinese tech shares after homegrown startup DeepSeek renewed confidence in China's AI technology. A Japanese convenience store giant 7&i Holdings says that it remains, quote, committed to exploring all opportunities after the retailer's founding family failed to secure financing required for a $58 billion management buyout. The company says the Ito clan reportedly negotiated financing from top Japanese banks as well as companies such as Itochu Corp, which owns the Family Mart chain. It adds that the consortium proposing the buyout could not agree on who would control the 7-Eleven operator after it's taken private. 7&i says it is now considering a rival offer from Canada's Alimentation Couche-Tard. The Circle K convenience store owner has offered some $47 billion for the takeover in what would be the biggest takeover of a Japanese company if successful. Last September, 7&i rejected the Canadian firm's nearly $40 billion bid, citing undervaluation. 7&i shares dropped as much as 12.5% in Tokyo during morning trade, slicing the company's market value to around $38 billion, retreating to around 11% at the close in Tokyo today. A surging global demand for matcha is sparking fears of long-term shortages in Japan's tea industry. According to official figures, Japan's export value of green tea, which includes matcha, reached a record high of $244 million in 2024. That's roughly 25% increase from the previous year. Analysts say rising demand is largely due to social media's influence as well as a travel boom to Japan driven by a weak yen. The Agricultural Ministry says that Japan's aging population is exacerbating production woes, and that's mainly due to the lack of successors willing to take over the family business. High demand also raising concerns over disruptions to the green tea powder's delicate supply chain, which has driven some Japanese companies to enact purchase limits on ground matcha powder last year. The decision, experts say, is to ensure supply for its long-standing customers at temples, shrines, and other venues that use matcha for religious or ceremonial purposes. Toyota Motors' worldwide production rose for the first time in a year in January. The world's biggest automaker said that global output increased 6% year-on-year, while domestic production rose 22%, offsetting an overseas production decline. Now, as deliveries bounce back in Japan, the carmaker is finally beginning to show signs of recovery after a series of regulatory scandals and major recalls abroad last year, forcing it to dial back on production. Mercedes-Benz and its subsidiaries reportedly plan to cut up to 15% of their workforce in China. Bloomberg says the job cuts will primarily impact its financing and sales units, as the German manufacturer faces intensifying competition in the world's largest car market. Mercedes' units are struggling to compete with local institutions, including state-owned banks that can offer more attractive car loans to buyers. Mercedes-Benz has already begun job cuts, but the pace of the layoffs has accelerated this month. Now, trade war worries kept market sentiment fragile in East Asia today. Japan's Nikkei closing higher, recovering from a decline in the previous session. Although gains were capped as chipmakers Advantest fell despite a strong growth forecast from its client NVIDIA. South Korean shares also ended lower, dragged down by a decline in NVIDIA supplier SK Hynix. China markets ending the day mixed after a tech rally on optimism about the country's renewed AI push, taking a pause. Shanghai Composite did close the day 0.2% higher. Shenzhen went the other way, down 0.26%, and benchmark Hang Seng Index 0.3% lower. Cryptocurrency Bitcoin languishing near the 86,000 mark. Other tokens also nursing even bigger losses. More than $800 billion has been wiped off global cryptocurrency markets in recent weeks. And that's as the enthusiasm that swept the crypto industry after Donald Trump's election victory last year ebbs away. Experts saying unease regarding President Trump's inaction related to enacting some of the reforms he promised is hurting traders. They're also being spooked by tariffs, sending them racing out of the risky assets. And that'll do it for Business Otelli.
Thanks so very much, Roland. Well, we're going to go for another break now, but coming up on East Asia tonight. DeepSeek may have shaken up the AI world, but how does it compare to ChatGPT? The two chatbots race after this break. Hello again, this is East Asia Tonight, and here are the top stories we've been monitoring. Media reports suggest Beijing may impose tight control this year over US IPOs of Chinese companies. The Financial Times says that Chinese authorities believe companies with small capitalization and weak fundamentals are prone to market manipulation. Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong has warned that international security is becoming increasingly fragile. The statement comes amid growing concerns about a Chinese naval flotilla operating near its waters and Beijing's recent live fire drills in the Tasman Sea. South Korea's intelligence sound the alarm on the north, sending more troops to Russia. The assessment follows a news report that between 1,000 and 3,000 North Korean troops were newly transported to Kursk between January and February. Now, strategies to boost AI development will likely be discussed at China's upcoming two sessions. China's top economic officials have already highlighted AI as a key economic strategy this year. Now, DeepSeek has since entered the scene, shaking up the global AI race. But how does DeepSeek compare to the leading chatbot ChatGPT. Well, CNA's Tan Yu-Guan brings professionals in Shanghai together for a chatbot showdown.
Ethan, Yo-Yo, Jingfei, and Eric are from different professions, but they all use AI chatbots to help them with their work. As a budding singer-songwriter and a programmer, Ethan was an early adopter, starting 3 years ago. Today, he uses AI chatbots such as Suno to inspire his lyrics and even generate the singing. For our test, Ethan got two leading AI chatbots, ChatGPT and DeepSeek, to write HTML code to build a website to generate Valentine's Day greetings.
如果以今天的测试来讲呢，我会选 DeepSeek。其实 DeepSeek 生出来的这个网页会相对来说稍微更丰富一点。
Executive Secretary Yo-Yo also finds that DeepSeek generates richer content. Previously, Yo-Yo often used another AI chatbot, Claude, and even subscribed to the paid version of ChatGPT last year to generate documents at work. Both can only be accessed in China via VPN. But
今年年初的时候 ，DeepSeek 不是大火嘛？因为一方面它又不需要有一些外界的辅助就是去支持，然后就可以使用它。另外一方面，它可能更了解我们中国本土化的一些业务场景。
when Yo-Yo got DeepSeek and ChatGPT to generate a circular to employees, she found DeepSeek's language warmer, whereas ChatGPT's output was purely functional. It's an observation that Jingfei concurs. The film lecturer uses chatbots to help her generate inspiration for her scripts.
DeepSeek 它在中文语境的理解，还有这个文化环境的解释度上面，我觉得是很强的。它确实在非常多的方面，不仅仅是提示我其实我还可以把这个故事往这个方向去推进。它会给我的人物写一个我完全没有意想到的这个职业。
But Jingfei thinks that ChatGPT has a competitive advantage that DeepSeek doesn't have: multimodal inputs.
我可以丢给他一张照片，比如说这个照片可能是我随手在街上拍的一个女孩子的背影，请把它就是 develop 成一个 character。GPT 是可以替我做这件事的。比如说我们刚才只是做了一些比较初步的剧本工作，但其实里面有非常多的调整。有的时候我会觉得老是在打字很麻烦，所以我就会打开 ChatGPT 的语音功能。那用语音呢，我觉得会比较快。想做一些修改。
Eric, the only foreigner among the four, deals with corporate clients of his company's smart connectivity services. He sometimes uses AI chatbots to crunch usage data to give him preliminary results.
So today is a very classic example where I have a dispute on my data. So what I did was to input the raw data into ChatGPT to come back with total utilization. Several attempts on ChatGPT actually came out the correct data, same output, whereas in DeepSeek, several attempts on the result came back different. So subsequently, I tried using the R1 and it came back with same result as ChatGPT, but the process took a long while because there was thinking process. Subsequently, when I tried to verify it, we encountered server busy.
The issue of busy servers is a matter of capacity and could easily be solved with more funds. But chatbots making up figures or hallucinating is a far more challenging problem. In fact, it is one of the top challenges facing all AI developers today. But DeepSeek seems to suffer from this far more than other chatbots. A report by AI startup Vectora found that DeepSeek v3 hallucinates more than many of its peers, while DeepSeek R1 is at the bottom of the pack. DeepSeek's knowledge base is also cut off at July 2024, leading it to be unable to answer even the most basic questions beyond that date. So why then is DeepSeek receiving so much attention?
First, the model is very good, but at a significantly lower price. The DeepSeek V3, according to their paper, the training cost only about $6 million, which is a fraction of the cost of Llama 3.5, which is another one of the best open models from Meta. DeepSeek is able to release this model in an open source nature. the whole AI community. They can study the technical papers and they can share the technical innovations of this model. DeepSeek really showcased that the gap between the China and the cutting edge AI technology from the West is not as big as previously imagined.
But things could change quickly. Like a highway with no speed limits, the global AI sector is now going at blinding speed. Even as we speak, the next iteration of AI to break paradigms is probably just round the corner.
And for more on this, CNA's Tan Yu-Guan chats with us live from Shanghai. Great work there. I really enjoyed watching that experiment you did, Yu-Guan. Well, speaking to the rest of the AI industry in China, what exactly do they want out of the 2 sessions, which will focus quite a fair bit on AI?
Well, some could be looking out for government support, but I think more of them will be looking out for an environment that allows them to move fast and break things. I think Xi Jinping's recent meeting with the leading lights of the country's tech sector is a government move in the right direction for them. Many see that meeting as signaling that the government is ready to tone down its regulatory clampdown and is ready again to rally the private sector and the tech sector in particular to spur economic growth. So many would be hoping for more of such signals. After all, China's leading AI player, DeepSeek, for example, wasn't a recipient of any government handouts or attention that we know of before it came out with its leading AI model. So, a top-down model might not work. It wasn't really even, DeepSeek wasn't even really an AI tech company. Rather, it was a fintech investment company whose founder coughed up his own money to develop AI model originally to spot investment opportunities. So it would be near impossible for the government to make specific bets on the winners. But what they can do is to make room for innovation to flourish, because as the DeepSeek example has shown, entrepreneurs in China have the massive capital and the risk appetite needed for technological breakthroughs. And engineers here have the brains for innovation. What they need is the right environment. Otelli?
Yes, the so-called environment, it's not really all up to Beijing, is it? There are other external factors here. US, for example, putting pressure on China in different ways.
Indeed, the American restrictions on the export of advanced AI chips to China is one good example of that. Yes, given the lack of good local alternatives for the time being, it would by right slow down the AI sector in China. But, it doesn't seem to be doing so. Well, earlier I spoke to Tony Peng, whom you saw earlier in the package. If you recall, he is the author of one of a handful of Substack newsletters focused on the AI sector in China. And this is what he has to say.
So what we're seeing today is that these hardware limitations are forcing the Chinese AI labs like DeepSeek to really innovate on algorithms, on the architecture, and even on how to better use these limited hardware. Because many AI labs have fewer, less advanced GPUs. So they're focusing on how I can better optimizing the architecture and the algorithms to train a much more efficient AI models. So in other words, scarcity fosters innovation.
But it does need to be more efficient, doesn't it, Yu-Guan? Because based on what we heard in your story, in your experience with DeepSeek, you have encountered some issues with it.
Yes, the most critical of which was, of course, the hallucinating problem, which I mentioned in the package. Another is the fact that DeepSeek's database stops at July last year. So if you ask the chatbot about the blockbuster Nezha 2 this Chinese New Year, for example, DeepSeek will tell you it hasn't been released yet. But in the more creative aspects, DeepSeek seems to rival ChatGPT. This is especially so in the context of China. This applies too to more mundane tasks, like finding a restaurant, for example. Yo-Yo, our executive secretary, one of our testers, tried to use both chatbots to find a restaurant for her boss in Shanghai, and this is what she found out.
我就会发现，在上海这一个层面 ，DeepSeek 它给我的答案它会更多，它会把价格、然后推荐理由，还有这个餐厅地址在哪里都会写进去。但是 GPT 给我的答案，它就是只写了说它为什么 推荐这家餐厅，然后它的地址在哪里，就会少掉价格这个方面的东西。然后后来我就想，那要不我们换到纽约看看，去找一下美国的餐厅。然后这个时候好像结果会有一点不一样，就是 GPT 反而它给出的答案更加丰富，它甚至会给到我这家餐厅它的特色菜是什么，以及它的一个坐标，然后它的邮编是哪里。然后 DeepSeek 在这个纽约的餐厅这个方面呢，它就不会告诉我说这家餐厅它的特色菜是什么，然后不会给我一些推荐理由啦。
So we see there that both chatbots do have some geographical advantages, or shall we say limitations. Of course, you must keep in mind that we're just seeing the beginnings of AI chatbots. The sector is moving really fast. In fact, this week, another AI chatbot, Claude, just released a new version. So what we see today could be very different in a year's time. Now, last November, I caught up with a couple of AI insiders in town for a Baidu event, and I thought what they say about the AI sector today does put all the hype about AI into perspective.
There's definitely a lot of things going on, but there is no clear cut in terms of a clear business model in terms of monetization. Everyone is trying something. Just like any technology that started from scratch, you always need to go through the entire process of actually trying it out, and a lot of trial error before it becomes really big at some point when you cross the inflection point.
When you talk about AI, we need to understand that AI is really the evolution of technology. 200 years ago, we saw the advent of machines, electricity. It really impacted everybody. Now, when you think about AI, let's remember, it's not that we already achieved the state of ultimate AI, artificial general intelligence. We're in a process. The AI that we see today, it's only the first AI. Some people say it's the worst AI, we will never know. Because what is coming later, it's going to be much better. This point, when we find AI intelligence available as electricity is available today, it's still going to take some time.
Well, in fact, an investor I spoke to last August at a social event just told me straight in the face that there's a bubble going on in the AI sector, because many AI companies are just bleeding money and not making any, like many tech companies today. But he did stress it's a bubble that is necessary. And it's a bubble that the government needs to take care not to burst, because the bubble helps investment and talent to flood the AI sector and allow it to innovate and grow. So that's something delegates at the two sessions in Beijing would need to consider as they deliberate on how to regulate the AI sector, yet foster an environment to keep the innovations coming. Oteli?
Well, the good news is consumers are spoiled for choice. Thank you so very much. CNA's Tan Yu Guan, live in Shanghai. Coming up next on East Asia tonight. Next stop, North Korea. The reclusive country opens its borders to tourists for the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic. A Hong Kong court has sentenced 7 people to jail terms of between 25 and 37 months. The individuals, including former legislator Lam Chuk Ting, were convicted last December for rioting. Now, Lam received the harshest jail term of 3 years and 1 month. The incident dates back to a mob violence at Yuen Long MTR station on the 21st of July 2019, at the peak of the anti-government protests in Hong Kong. Last December, the court ruled that the 7 protesters had gathered inside the train station, and the unlawful assembly gradually developed into a riot. A situation worsened when the individuals were accused of provoking another group dressed in white by engaging in violent behaviors. The assembly of the 7 dressed in black, the court said, was not purely by coincidence. In sentencing, the judge said that the 2019 social unrests were a major turning point for the lives of many Hong Kong residents, adding that he hopes that this serves as a lesson for people to gradually smooth out ideological and political divisions and treat matters rationally in accordance with all laws. One person has died after a wildfire broke out in northeastern Japan. Thousands of residents have been ordered to evacuate, and authorities say more than 80 buildings have been damaged in the blaze. This marks the 3rd wildfire in about a week. The blaze started yesterday afternoon, and it has since burned some 600 hectares of land in Ofunato City in northeastern Iwate Prefecture. Firefighting efforts are ongoing in residential areas. The city's mayor says the fire is large-scale, adding that the cause of the blaze is still not known. Military helicopters have been mobilized, and the Fire and Disaster Management Agency has called for emergency support from 6 nearby prefectures. Local authorities say 500 homes are without power. Nearby schools and kindergartens are also closed, while part of a train line in the city suspended. And staying with Japan, the number of babies born in the country fell to a record low in 2024, making this the 9th consecutive year of decline. Well, there were about 720,000 births, which is a decline of 5% on the year. The lower number is despite measures in 2023 by former Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's government to boost support for couples having children. There were 1.6 million deaths during the same period, meaning that more than 2 people died in Japan for every new baby born in 2024. The overall negative birth rate once again underscores Japan's fears when it comes to the rapid aging and dwindling of its population. Although the number of marriages edged up 2.2% in 2024, that came only after steep declines, such as a plunge of 12.7% in 2020. In contrast, neighboring South Korea saw its fertility rate rise for the first time last year in 9 years. North Korea has reopened to foreign tourists for the first time in 5 years following the COVID-19 pandemic. Beijing-based tour operators are the first to lead groups into the reclusive nation's special economic zone. CNA's Tan Su-hui with this report.
Here it is, North Korea. There you go.
He's been waiting for this moment for 5 years. It was the only country left on this Argentine-Italian's checklist, and the 32-year-old has now visited every nation in the world.
So I got a phone call saying, okay, North Korea is open. Are you coming? Boom. Sure. Already have my backpack, my passport, some money with me. And when it's your last country, you're excited, you're happy, you're emotional.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Pasquale crossed the border from China's Yanji to North Korea's Rason on 20th February with 11 other tourists, and they became one of the first Western tourists to do so. During his 4 days there, he was shown the special economic zone, where there were schools, factories, and breweries.
They were very kind of cautious with us, taking care of us. They were concerned of how we're going to behave. If we would do something wrong, highly chances that they will ban any foreign tourists after us.
One Beijing-based tour operator, which has been taking tourists to North Korea since 2008, also says the itinerary was less flexible and more structured this time around, but says new attractions were added.
We visit what's called the traders market, which is a market in Rason which mostly sells foreign products. So that's actually quite interesting to see what foreign products are being sold in the DPRK. That's also a great place that you can buy locals, like street food from street food vendors, and go to local bars that are within that market as well.
I can play lots of musical instruments.
While Western tourists have crossed the border, Chinese authorities have yet given their citizens the green light. That's despite earlier reports stating that a Chinese tour operator had started accepting registrations. A Foreign Affairs spokesperson declined to comment on activities of specific travel agencies during a regular news conference.
Before the pandemic, Chinese nationals made up the vast majority of foreign tourists to North Korea, with a record 350,000 visiting in 2019. But ever since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, China-North Korea relations have been strained.
One analyst believes Chinese tourists will bring important economic benefits to North Korea, but sees several obstacles in the way.
For past almost 2 years, the relationship between China and North Korea has been deteriorate. There haven't seen any kind of a positive sign to getting closer between these two countries, because still, you see, North Korea and Russia, they are maintain very close cooperation. You know that North Korea has dispatched their troops and sent many weapons to support Russia in Ukraine war. So overall, we have to wait. And another kind of factor, variable, is of course Trump. totally depend on the relationship between United States and China. If relationship deteriorate, China has more motivation and more reason to consider North Korea as their important asset.
Meanwhile, the capital, Pyongyang, remains shut. Analysts believe it will be an important signal to the world once it reopens, and there's already keen interest.
I can tell you, I love it. I love North Korea, and I'm happy to go back because we, like you said, we only saw Rason. But what about the rest? I want to go to Pyongyang. I want to explore more about the South. I want to know more, and I would love to talk more with people.
North Korea remains one of the world's most repressive regimes, with heavy international sanctions lobbed on it due to its nuclear weapons program. Tan Si-hui, CNA, Beijing.
I hope you've enjoyed Thursday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines. You can find it anytime at cna.asia. You can also look us up, Facebook and on YouTube. Thanks for your company.